Well, it's kind of hard to find words to imagine the horror of being confined to a 9 feet long and 6 feet wide cell.
It wasn't just a shock tactic. I was furious and it poured out. I don't tend to have a filter because I think that that's something that is only really reserved for women. White men don't seem to have a filter in our day and age, especially not the more successful ones. Piers Morgan, Donald Trump.
I'm 6'2", I'm classically good looking, I'm white, I'm highly educated, and that I get to sit across from you and say, yes, I'm trans. Visibility does save lives.
So if I vilify half the people in this country, where is that going to bring me? I think there's so much more that we can do if we all look at each other and say, well, where can we agree? Because that's normally where the most progress is made.
I just wonder, listening to you and hearing what you just said about the importance of tackling inequalities and giving people chances, whether there is possibly a bit of a politician inside you.
I hate politicians. I hate politicians. Even the ones I like, I can't stand.
A very warm welcome to my look back at some of the most memorable moments of Hard Talk in 2019. This year, we've decided to focus not on the big political interviews, but on some of the extraordinary personal stories that we've heard on the program. Individuals, young and old, who've defied convention, stood up to authority, and found their voice. This year, we're saluting the courage of those whose spirits could not be crushed. Let's get to 1972, the murder of a young white prison guard, Brent Miller. Did you do it?
No. I mean, the evidence, there's such an abundance of physical evidence that clearly, says, I was not involved in this murder. Or there was physical evidence. They found a bloody fingerprint in Mr. Miller's blood on the door. They never pursued it beyond comparing it to me and the other guys who were charged. It didn't match any of the people that worked the crime scene. Well, it's kind of hard to find words to imagine the horror of being confined to a 9 feet long and 6 feet wide cell. And the actual space itself is much smaller, because you have mellow beds attached to the wall that take up a great part of the cell. You have a mellow table and chair on the other wall, and you have a toilet bowl, a zinc combination in the back. So you have a very narrow path in which to maneuver up and down the cell. So although the cell is 9 feet long and 6 feet wide, the actual space is much smaller. Try to stay in your bedroom 23 hours. Go in your backyard and draw a 9 feet, 6 feet about a square, and just stay in there for 23 hours. Now multiply that 1,000,000 times. And to add to that, you know that then absolutely nothing you can do can change the situation you're in. When I was released from prison, it took me about 3 weeks of being, in society to realize that nothing had changed.
But I'm mindful that you walked out in the very year that Barack Obama served his last year as President of the United States of America, the first black man to hold that position. Can you really say to me nothing had changed in 44 years?
Technology. Look, I was in prison when President Obama was elected. My reality was that nothing would change. This is one man. We have a culture of racism and bigotry and white supremacy that go back to the founding of America. And one man just can't change that in 8 years. That's the longest period of time he would be allowed to be president.
Will it change? I just wonder what you say to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, because you speak as a guy who all those years ago committed to the Black Panther movement to achieve what you regarded as justice for black people in America. How do you think your grandchildren and great-grandchildren should carry out that struggle, if you still see it as a struggle?
Well, yeah, I think it's a social struggle. Matter of fact, it's one of the personal motivations for me. I don't want my great-grandkids 30 years from now to be sitting here being interviewed on a stage talking to people about racism and institutional racism and systemic application of racism. You know, I would, you know, as Martin Luther King said, I would rather like to be, hopefully a society has evolved to the point where they are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, not their ethnicity, not physical features or hair texture.
Your personal story became ever darker because in 1984, at the height of your athletics career, you decided you wanted to escape East Germany. The authorities learned of your plan, and ultimately you were required to undergo a very serious operation, a stomach operation, which left you with long-term health problems. It killed your athletics career. You have suggested that it was done deliberately to crush your ambition to leave the country. Do you have any evidence to prove that?
Ich werde nie in meinem Leben diesen einen Arzt finden, der sagt, das habe ich getan. Aber es gibt eine Stasi-Akte, eine Stasi-Opferakte über mich, wo es sehr starke Indizien gibt. Also 2 Historiker haben sich das angeschaut, in welchem Kontext diese Operation stand. Es steht in der Akte über mich, jetzt haben wir endlich die Möglichkeit, sie auf Eis zu legen. Man war Sportverräter, ja, in diesem Kontext. Ich gehörte nicht mehr zum Clan, nicht mehr zum Sport selber. Ich war der Feind geworden und das ist natürlich ein starkes Motiv. Jeder Athlet in der DDR, der vorhatte zu fliehen, das Land zu verlassen, war ein Feind.
What about your father in all of this? He was in the Stasi. Do you believe he colluded with the authorities in what happened to you?
Also er war Terroragent und er ist auch gefragt worden, das steht in meiner Akte, er ist gefragt worden, ist sie sicher oder ist sie nicht sicher? Ja? Also kommt sie zurück oder kommt sie nicht zurück? Also er war über die Vorgänge zumindest informiert.
Inevitably, on Hard Talk, where we try to hold the powerful to account, many of our guests are, like me, greying around the edges. But this year, we wanted to hear from young people trying to change the world, facing up to the challenges that most resonate with their generation.
Well, I just think we're living in this really bizarre time where now celebrities just have carte blanche to sell whatever they want, however they want, to young impressionable people. There's no regulations, there are no legal implications to what they're doing. They're selling toxic products that often are laxatives, not declaring that they're laxatives, not doing what we do with cigarettes and all kinds of other different things, which is declaring the ingredients and declaring the side effects. For some reason, they're allowed to just post a heavily photoshopped picture and a lie and pretend they take this, they drink this shake or eat this lollipop or eat a magical weight loss banana or whatever it is that they're selling, and be able to get away with that.
But you use very extreme language. Is that necessary? I mean, you said, for instance, the Kardashians, their pockets are lined with the blood and diarrhea of teenage girls, obviously referring to the fact that some of these products have a laxative effect. Kim Kardashian's response was, you're going to get a backlash for almost everything, so long as you like it or believe in it, or it's worth it financially, whatever your decision may be, as long as you're okay with it. That's all right.
Yeah, sell heroin to children, as long as you'll back it yourself, that's fine. I'm not saying that's what she sells, I'm just saying it's the same ethos.
Sure the Kardashians don't, yes.
I wouldn't be here right now sitting opposite you or speaking at the UN or any of these things if I hadn't made a big noise, and sometimes you have to use shock culture, and it's particularly shocking when a woman and a woman of colour speaks out, because we are the ones who are the most under pressure to be obedient. And so I was genuinely angry. It wasn't just a shock tactic. I was furious and it poured out. I don't tend to have a filter because I think that that's something that is only really reserved for women. White men don't seem to have a filter in our day and age, especially not the more successful ones. Piers Morgan, Donald Trump. I reserve that same right. And so I say whatever I want. And I wanted to say something that would wake people up and make sure that they knew that it was okay for me to tell truth to power.
I think the more and more you think about how right you are and how wrong everybody else is, the less you'll learn. a lot of people in this country get stuck in these bubbles, especially because of social media, where if you surround yourself with enough people who share your thoughts, you get this holier-than-thou complex where you're right, you're totally right, and anybody who's wrong is a bad person. So I'm very pro-gun control. I think we need to control all the guns in this country. People don't like saying gun control because it's, the right kind of took that over and made it too intense. But I share the principle that if something's out of control, you should control it, and guns are out of control. So when I'm with other people who are pro-gun control and we're all talking about gun control and how great it is, I start to think, well, if you don't think this, you must be a really bad person. And then I met these people and I said, these people aren't bad people. I don't think they're right, and I think the way they look at this country and the world does not align with my own views. But these are not people who want to hurt others. These are people who are wrong. And I'm wrong about a lot of things. I spend a lot of my time being wrong. It's one of my favorite hobbies. So if I vilify half the people in this country, where is that going to bring me? I think there's so much more that we can do if we all look at each other and say, well, where can we agree? Because that's normally where the most progress is made.
Do you finally feel you've reached a place and are in a society where you can truly, comfortably be yourself?
Absolutely. But this is a privileged position, right? I'm here in London, England, on this set with you, having a really important conversation. I'm 6'2", I'm classically good looking, I'm white, I'm highly educated, and that I get to sit across from you and say, yes, I'm trans. Yes, I come from this lineage of, a lineage that is across Western cultures, across global South cultures, across the Aboriginal communities and the Samoan culture. Like, there is a history there, but that I get to safely here say that to you.
You're saying it's still a privilege to have that
Absolutely.
Security and safety.
Totally. And one that, of course, has come at a personal cost to me, but it's important that when I have the opportunity, right, to sit across from you and be able to be someone that perhaps someone else is seeing on the television, that they be able to say, okay, I'm okay. That's so important. I mean, visibility does save lives.
We love the fact that our Hard Talk interviews often prompt a lively debate amongst our worldwide audience, but nothing quite prepared us for the massive response to our interview with Mia Khalifa, the Lebanese-born former porn star who broke the silence that surrounds a multi-billion-dollar industry that commodifies sex and exploits young people. Now, I think we have to get to this one particular, and I mentioned at the beginning, the notorious video you were involved in, which actually involved 3 young people. You were one of them, and you were wearing the Islamic headscarf, often known as hijab. And of course, then it developed into a sort of a sex scene. You must have known how provocative that was.
I verbatim told them, you guys are going to get me killed.
And they said?
They just laughed.
Why didn't you then say, I'm not doing it?
Intimidation. I was scared.
But
I knew that if I said no, it would, they're not going to force you to do it. At that point, that's rape. No one's going to force you to have sex. But I was still scared. I mean, have you ever felt not scared, but nervous to speak up and say something at a restaurant when your food's not right and the waiter comes by and says, how is everything? I was intimidated, I was nervous.
What you are saying is that the concept of consent is sort of meaningless in the power dynamic between the men mostly who are controlling the porn industry and a young 21-year-old actress such as yourself.
Absolutely. When there's 4 white male producers in the room and you say something like that to them and they all just laugh, I mean, it's kind of devastating and it makes you not want to speak up and say anything again. It's the same with when you sign your contracts. You have, the president and the CEO of the company sitting in the room with you waiting for you to read it. And when you're reading it, you're not comprehending anything that's written because you're so nervous because people are staring at you.
I'm just trying to get my head around how stressful this must have been, and whether even now, because you sit here so poised and obviously a lot of time has passed and you've moved on, but do you think there is some sort of post-traumatic stress that is in you from this experience?
Yes, and I think it kicks in mostly when I go out in public, because the stares I get, I feel like people can see through my clothes, and it brings me deep shame. It makes me feel like I lost all right to my privacy, which I did, because I'm one Google search away.
Yeah. And those images you cannot expunge. No. You have no right, even though it is deeply personal to you, you have no right to remove them from anybody's view around the world.
Yeah.
It is very hard.
It is.
And I'm just thinking, this isn't, I mean, this story is your story, but frankly, it's also the story of other porn actors and actresses.
I honestly started seeing that recently after the interview came out, and people started reaching out, and all of the emails go, my manager checks them. And when he gets stuff like that, he filters them and sends them to me. And reading the words of some of these girls who have been sex trafficked and forced into porn, and all of these stories of girls whose lives have been ruined by it, and by men who have taken advantage of them, and by contracts that they didn't even understand the jargon of, it makes me feel like, okay, maybe it was good that I started talking, and that I posted this interview, and that I'm speaking out now, because other people feel the same way. And even if they don't relate on as deep a level as, you know, doing porn, they can relate on the level of being insecure and being pressured into doing something they didn't want to do.
Opinion surveys across the world show a worrying trend. Young people feel disconnected from status quo politics and politicians. The voices that really cut through don't belong to the politicians.
I'm not sitting here like I think like I'm fixed. I can fix all of you. I can't.
But isn't the danger you're doing your head in some more by taking on all of these other problems? It's wonderful that people reach out to you with their problems, but what does that do to you?
Do you know what is really, and I think it's everyone should probably take this on board, is like it's what you choose to. You have to filter stuff. It's what you choose to let in, really, because you do have the power to decide as to what you do let in. It's like I could read Twitter all day and look at all the people that are saying nasty things, you know, and that could become my opinion of myself, but I'm too old and too long in the tooth to be living my life for anybody else now. You know, I'm not living up to anyone else's expectations. I make my decisions based upon what I believe and what I want to do. Like the word selfish, I think we need to look at and really readdress the connotations attached to it, because you know, looking after yourself is in no way a bad thing at all. Like how many of us find ourselves in situations that we're in just because other people wanted us to be there? Like, you go with what you need to do for yourself. As long as it's not at the detriment of other people, then, you know, I had to work this out the hard way, but you're no good to anyone if you're no good to yourself. And I've had myself.
I just wonder, listening to you and hearing what you just said about the importance of tackling inequalities and giving people chances, whether there is possibly a bit of a politician inside you.
I hate politicians. I hate politicians. Even the ones I like, I can't stand.
Unlike politicians, to generalize massively, unlike politicians, you are a public figure that young people in particular can connect with and who do not for a second question your genuine interest in them. That is an incredible power you've got, and I just wonder if you're tempted to use it.
Do you know what? Yeah, I am, but in the way that I have kind of by accident stumbled into, and it's by not preaching, it's by not telling anyone how they should live or how they should do anything differently. It's just by, and it's how I learned from the people that I watched growing up and the people that I listened to.
If there is one global concern that's united young and old this year, it is climate change. Students have skipped school to join street protests across the world. They fear for the planet that they will inherit. And some individuals at the other end of life's journey are speaking out on their behalf. You, more than any other guest I've ever had on Hard Talk, have seen some of the most remote, wildest, most extreme parts of this planet of ours. I wonder whether you, in your travels today, really do feel that our planet is under pressure, is being compromised as never before.
Utterly, and I'm totally behind the youth, including my daughter who's been in Trafalgar Square talking about that sort of thing.
You mean she's been part of the Extinction Rebellion?
The effect on animals as well as humans. And it is dreadful, and it's very much there. And we in the Arctic, let me say, it's more easy to see the difference in the Arctic than the Antarctic. We've seen huge difference. In the 1970s, I was designing man-haul sledges, which were a little bit waterproof in case there was a canal. Now we're designing canoes, which can be hauled every now and again. So the amount of water in 20 years up there in this huge area of ice, which is shrinking, is enabling people to canoe to the pole instead of man-haul to the pole.
Are you a supporter of Extinction Rebellion, whose core message is that it's no good just sort of mouthing the rhetoric of caring about the planet? The urgency of this means that we have to change how we live right now.
I'm totally in support of the rebellion as long as it doesn't put people off by doing violent things or becoming too like the Gilets jaunes. As long as they complain and get the political people to have a real drive, which is difficult because of their business side, you know, very difficult indeed. But that's why it requires something like the Extinction Rebellion of old and young, really trying to push the movement to get sensible carbon behavior, which is against business.
Old and young together, engaging all of us in a shared endeavour. It can be done. I'll leave you with the words of one of my most special guests of 2019, Michael Collins, who 50 years ago was one of the 3-man Apollo 11 mission, which put the first man on the moon. Happy New Year, everyone. Did you, as other astronauts have discussed, and of course back in 1969 there were very few men who'd had the experience that you were having of seeing our blue planet from space. Did you find it changed your view of humanity, of our place in the universe?
Yes, I believe it did. If there's any part of the flight of Apollo 11 that sticks in my memory, it is the memory of a little tiny thing that you can obscure with your thumbnail, blue and white, the white of clouds, the blue of the ocean, just a trace of land, gorgeous, very shiny, bright background, totally black. I will remember that all my life, and it leads one to consider, well, is it so pretty? Is it so quiet? Is it so pristine? For some reason, the word fragile came up out of the murk somehow. I know not how, but I thought, God, it's a fragile little thing, isn't it?
11, Houston, if that's not the Earth, we're in trouble. That's the Earth, and we have a very